we've got a few objects in here, and these are objects. Well, of course, this is a fantasy plate. So here we have a huge teacup and a huge teapot. Um, and of course, they could be, if you're thinking about a fantasy story, they can be incorporated into this fantasy story. The story that we are actually telling here in those little black boxes with the eye on them is a combination of a fantasy story and a werewolf story. Uh, and we took that as a challenge. Essentially, we started with a werewolf story, and we took it as a challenge. Uh, can we find a way to tie a werewolf story into a fantasy story? Well, of course we can. Um, that's all it takes is some imagination. Um,
And we've got plenty of that.
well, yeah, we got a whole bunch of people with running their imaginations, our imaginations. Um, now let's see. We actually have several places around here, and I'm going to have to turn around. Yes, there. I'm looking at some props that we brought in, um, and you see the castle over there.
Absolutely. Let me just get around where I can
Yeah,
see
looking at it,
well.
and that cat. Yeah, and
I'm moving up so people can see. It's a
yes,
very large crystal castle here.
actually, it's not crystal. It is made, and this part of the story, it is made out of titanium, a metal, a very hard, lustrous metal that looks a lot like silver but does not tarnish. Um, and so that sort of ties in with the story. But I think the notable thing about that is that is an item that was built in OpenSim, and it was imported, well, exported from OpenSim and imported into here by one of our writers. The writers can do things other than just write. Um, and then we also have a mushroom, and that mushroom also is part of the story. Basically,
And I'm looking at the mushroom right now, so
mhm. And the mushroom is also part of the story. Um, as you can see, it has the label Aerosmith on it, and that is part figures in the story. Um, and it's essentially we have two props. We will bring in perhaps a few more, but not many. Um, and our characters live. Well, let's see. Now, one of our another one of our characters lives in a distant island, the island that on the tree in the treetop house that is most distant from us, um, across a bridge, and that character is Oberon. If you well, for those people who know their Shakespeare, they know who Oberon is, and of course most writers do know their Shakespeare. Um,
yeah, I would hope that they would know.
I would hope, yeah. Um, and this is where Oberon lives, and he Oberon figures in the character. So does Titania, his wife. Um, they don't get along very well. At least, well, they don't get along very well still here in this story. They did not get along very well. And
If I remember right, they sort of kind of tried to murder each other, didn't they?
well, no, they didn't exactly do that, but they uh, Oberon got Titania using Puck's skill um, and methods, made Titania fall in love with Bottom, a workman with a donkey head. Uh, and that was part of the comedy, of course.
Yeah.
Um, and then Oberon, and then of course at the end, all of Oberon, well, various people undid the harm that they had done, and Oberon broke the spell so that Titania would not be in love indefinitely with the donkey-headed Bottom. Um,
It's always funny when you're forced to be in love with an ass.
oh well, yes, and And well, that is a contemporary remark also, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and we have some flowers here, which will also figure in the story, um, and of course now all of this hasn't been fully put together. That's why there's things are just are sitting around, but essentially what we're trying to illustrate, what we're illustrating here, we're not just trying, we're illustrating here what we can do in a web world.
Let's say, for example, that you are a teacher and you're teaching a writing class of your own, but you are teaching using Romeo and Juliet or Macbeth or something like that. We could change this environment to look exactly the way that you need it to look for a given class.
Yeah, well, and in fact, of course we wouldn't change it. We would just make another web page. After all, again, I want to remind people this is a web page, and it is not especially complicated to make a web page for those people who know how to do it. It would be for me and you, but for people that know how to do it, it's really it's mainly a matter of copying and pasting.
Yeah. And as you said, we're using different worlds to build the assets in the environment here. And so there's lots of people using lots of different software to
Yeah.
build the assets in these environments.
Well, and of course, one thing uh, we can do, um, uh, there's really, as you were saying, there's no limit to what we can do. Now, we can do Shakespeare, we can do space, we can do the moon, we can do stories on the moon, uh, we can do spaceship stories, any kind of spaceship, uh, and uh, there's really essentially no limit to what we can do. Um, uh, we can bring in, because we can bring in worlds from all sorts of places, from essentially many different worlds we can bring in from OpenSim,